Hello, thank you for joining us again today. My name is Nathan Rolfe, and I'm the president of the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces and your host for this segment. On behalf of the Tortora Brayda Institute and the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces, I would like to welcome you to this month's episode of our Cyber Workforce Series, where we speak with cyber professionals about their careers and journeys to help inform others on the diversity of paths within the cybersecurity and related industries, and hopefully support you, the listener, on your own personal cyber career journey. Before we meet this month's guest, I'd like to share a little bit about the two organizations making this series possible, the Tortora Brayda Institute and the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces. The Tortora Brayda Institute was created to promote collaboration across public and private sectors with a focus on business, culture, and diversity. Tortora Brayda looks to reshape and develop collaboration and partnership practices with a view to improving and securing business and economies. A core concept of their institute is the think tank for partnerships in AI and cybersecurity. Think Tank has allowed Tortora Brayda to bring together experts and leaders from the public and private sectors and academia around the world to reshape and develop collaboration and partnering practices while embracing the most critical technology growth. If you are not currently a member of the Institute, we invite you to visit their website at www.tortorabrayda.org to learn more and see how you can participate. The Association of U.S. Cyber Forces is a nonprofit professional association that provides a voice for the members of the cyber workforce who serve in military, government agencies, industry, and academia on specific cyber issues impacting national security. AUSCF is an advocate for positive change to policies and programs that better serve their membership and help minimize gaps between the private and public sector cybersecurity efforts. If you'd like to learn more about us or to join AUSCF, please visit our website at www.auscf.org. During today's discussion, feel free to drop questions into the chat, and as time allows, we will attempt to weave in those answers and responses. Your questions and feedback help directly shape this and future events. Today's guest is Guillermo Christensen. Guillermo is a partner with the law firm K&L Gates and former CIA intelligence officer and diplomat with the Department of State. He is a national security law practitioner focusing on cybersecurity, export controls and sanctions, and national security reviews. His cybersecurity work covers assessing risks, building effective cybersecurity programs, counseling boards and leadership teams, and managing incidents and breaches. He also guides companies in adopting better practical approaches to cybersecurity, including the benefits and risks of artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and advanced infrastructure such as data centers and distributed computers. Guillermo's work includes training other lawyers and security experts, for example, as an instructor at the FBI Chief Information Security Officer Academy in Quantico, where he has taught on the legal issues around incident response to hundreds of CISOs. Guillermo is active in both education and nonprofit circles, an accomplished writer in his field, and has a list of awards and affiliations way too numerous for us to list off in this short bio. Guillermo, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Nate, it's great to share the room with you as always. And you should add that I also have had a long affiliation with AUSCF, and we're very proud to be able to support AUSCF from K&L Gates, and also with TBI, that I've been very happy to be involved with Carlo and Jill and the team there, and all the things that we've been able to do together. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We didn't want to go too much into the nepotism side on that one with us internally, but we definitely appreciate your support to both organizations. So, and we've been doing this for about 2 years now. You are the first time we've had a lawyer, a diplomat, a former CIA officer on this program. Before we dive into the cyber-specific side of things, can you give us a quick synopsis on your career journey and how you kind of worked your way through those unique roles?
Yeah, I think the lawyer part is obviously the more probably the traditional one, and it was my midlife crisis. I went back to law school at night, but I basically was recruited into CIA when I was working on my master's degree. I was planning to be a foreign service officer, so a diplomat, and I was at an embassy, and people at the embassy who were doing things that seemed to be completely different than what they actually turned out to be, came to me and said, "You should really come work for us." And I said, I took the foreign service exam. I'm going to do that. And they're like, that's not what we're talking about. And came back, met with somebody over coffee. They explained what it was all about. Back then, this is like 1989, there was very little information out there on what, CIA was about or how they hired people. Turned out later on, I figured out that there were some professors that I had studied under at Georgetown who had probably put my name forward and other things. So I was recruited that way, and I went into the operations side of CIA. So I was not a lawyer. Eventually, after some years went by, I spent some time in the Balkans during that war and things like that. I transitioned into more of a policy role, and then spent a year as the CIA fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, which was this kind of big eye-opening experience for me, where I all of a sudden met all these people in very, big companies, big banks, law firms, and things like that. And I realized that, you could actually do more with the training and the experience that I had at CIA than just break other countries' laws on, in pursuit of the U.S. national security interest. So that's when I decided to go to law school. After law school, I went into the areas of national security practice. Mostly, it's been a combination of high technology and cyber. I think I handled the first private sector incident right out of law school, like 2005. And then like with the next year, I think I was involved in a nation state breach for a very significant defense contractor involved in missile defense. And I remember that many of the people I was dealing with in the on the FBI side and others had really never dealt with anything like that, a crisis in particular in that way. And we ended up kind of putting together the framework for how to do that at the outset. And that began a journey down the road. I was always very familiar and at ease with technology. My father was a very early computer science and programmer back in the days of punch cards and stuff like that. He worked for IBM. I had computers at home. I broke them regularly, trying to make them do other things, which of course is the definition of a real hacker, right? I wouldn't call myself that. I would just say that I like playing with them, and particularly with hardware. I was really into computers and hacking cars and things like that. So very comfortable with still, I build networks and mess around with them to this day. So it's just, I would say the bytes and the bits were always in my DNA. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So basically, what we normally consider the cyber side of the house kind of came first for you before the law side. Is that what I'm
Yes.
hearing? Okay.
Yeah.
And was it by design or just chance and happenstance that you were able to bring that skill set into your law practice that first incident that you mentioned?
No, a lot of this is just it's a combination of an accident or a circumstance that pops up, and I guess part of my attitude on most things has been, if it sounds interesting, unusual, a little crazy, the answer is always yes, let's try it, which is really, and that is the mentality of CIA, right? And the mentality of the OSS that came before. And it's one of those things that when I mentor, younger people coming into whichever, whether it's law or intelligence, that has always been kind of my prime directive is, say yes, and then figure out the consequences. Hopefully they're all good, sometimes not, but people give up so many opportunities because they want to, like, should I really do that? What are the downsides? What are the missed opportunities? And life, you can't, I'm not smart enough to project out all the permutations of what could happen. So I generally tended to say yes. Also, sometimes, the accidents can be as kind of humorous as, I think I came to the attention potentially of people at CIA for having some technical knowledge because I may or may not have played a prank on someone back when security wasn't as good as it would be now. And back when the repercussions for what I did were nowhere near as serious. I mean, they were serious, but they were nowhere near as serious as they would be today. And people were like, wow, interesting. Okay. And so that opened some doors, The great thing about CIA, and it was one of the best jobs, one of the best things I ever did, I'll tell you, was fantastic for me, was the opportunity they're always trying out new things because no one goes to CIA for the easy problems that someone else does. The problems that end up there are usually the ones where they've gone through, okay, state, they can't do it. DOD can't do it. And not because they don't have capabilities, because they don't have the authorities, or the authorities specifically forbid them from doing that. And so you end up with these problems being presented to CIA that are extremely challenging and often very risky and require imagination. And that's my favorite kind of a problem. And I still, to this day, with my clients, when I have a client that is active in Ukraine, when we started talking about that project, I was like, this is exactly what I want to be doing, right? So
we've kind of established you were, I guess, an early trendsetter in this world of establishing, kind of bringing together law and cyber. Um, Today, you teach AI for lawyers, I believe, at Georgetown. So it's obviously a little bit more inherent in the topics that lawyers need to be aware of. Was there any discussion of this type of work or computer crimes or things like that when you first started in the field?
very little, in terms of computer crime, there was a law on the books already, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, that has been there for a while. There were a few other ways. Defense contractors obviously had responsibilities. This was, well after the famous story of, the cuckoo's egg, when a researcher discovered kind of one of the original East German / Soviet penetrations of the Air Force through an academic network, right? And that was kind of the eye-opening event for a lot of people in DoD. But it was pretty early on that that started. We didn't have any significant data privacy laws in the United States, and that once that began changed, then lawyers began to flock to this area, especially data privacy. But even today, there are not that many what I'll call true cybersecurity law practitioners. There's a lot of data privacy lawyers who do that and do it well, but cybersecurity has been has not been core legal for a while. That is changing, right? Whether it's in the non-DoD sector with all of these regulators like the New York Department of Financial Services and others that aren't just focused on data privacy, but they're focused on the integrity of these systems, the financial system or critical infrastructure, because people have woken up, unfortunately late in my view, to the fact that if you are going to enter into a conflict, you're probably going to start it by cyber means because it's cheaper, easier, often very effective, and you would not go to war. I mean, you would not be dropping bombs on someone before you've already used up as much of your digital capabilities, because that's just what makes sense. That's how you would think of a conflict in many cases. And then when you think of the evolution in the defense sector on this issue, we've come a long way from those early experiences I had to a far more rigorous, and I think most companies, most defense sector companies in the DIB understand now that they have a responsibility to protect the information that's on their systems, even though they may not yet fully comprehend how to do that under the rules that the government imposes, which are not easy to understand. So there's a lot of legal work, because I guess underlying all of this is this concept of what's reasonable, right? And whenever I always tell people, whenever you see the word reasonable, you should be thinking that's when you should be talking to a lawyer, because reasonable is where you start balancing this versus this, and what are the downsides and risks. And although I think lawyers often get a bad rap for how they deal with risk, in the world I inhabit, a lawyer who's comfortable with risk has a real power to be able to help clients understand their problems, because it's all about balancing risk, and not just the business, but all the other dimensions, reputational,
So the way you described it as basically the need for cyber savvy lawyers or lawyers specializing in cybersecurity is growing. If someone was looking to essentially become one of those individuals, would you have a recommendation that they pursue law first and learn cyber post that, vice versa, or perhaps even try and do both at the same time?
Yeah, I'm a very strong believer that, except for a very small subset of people who were born knowing that they wanted to be lawyers and they have a good idea that that's what they want, most people should go and do something else with their life before they step foot in law school. And part of that is that to go from undergrad to law school so quickly, spend 7 years, often with significant financial implications, I think limits your creativity and your ability to understand the world. I would, if people can, I would say go work in business, go into the military, go into the government, go work in Congress, do something where you see the way the world works before you come and play in the world of how the world should work, which is often how the law looks at it. So that's one thing. And I'd say, 4 to 5 years, not just like a 1 or 2 year thing, but a decent amount of time. And then, and plus it'll make you a better law student because you'll be able to manage your time much more effectively once you've learned to do that in the real world. But if your interest is in cyber, I think you should not go study cybersecurity necessarily. I think you should get very comfortable understanding the entire environment of technology, from and networking, for example. Understanding how networking works is still extremely important. Understanding how data works, how data is analyzed. Hardware is important. Thinking about how systems operate, criticality of systems, all of those things are important. I think you should definitely take your hand and do some programming, learn how those zeros and ones go from the base layer all the way to the screen that you're working on. All of that is very helpful because when you're doing what I do, you may be overseeing a team of people from all of these different areas in a cyber incident: the forensic people, the people in the business, the CIO, the CTO, the business people. And your job is often to be the universal translator between all that, because you will find, even in companies that operate with strong integration, they speak different languages. And so if you can make sure that everyone is communicating using and understanding the same terminology, you will cut through a lot of the complications that often cause companies a lot of pain in the middle of an incident, which is to say, most cyber incidents are about the worst thing a company will experience in the normal course of business, unless they have, a tragic event where there's loss of life because of a natural disaster or a fire or something like that. But short of those events, which are relatively uncommon, I hope, cyber is the next thing that's on the list of really bad shit that happens, and they happen a lot. I mean, if we had as many fires as we have cyber incidents, we'd all be walking around in asbestos suits with, fire trucks outside every office, right?
So you're kind of advocating for more of a generalism in terms of knowledge of technology, not necessarily a focus, as you mentioned, not so much cybersecurity, not so much programming in a specific language, but more that broad understanding, mile wide, inches deep kind of situation.
Yeah, I do. And part of that is the technology in this area moves really quickly. So the systems and the issues that were there a couple of years ago may still be relevant, but you're going to have to keep moving with it. And so the broader education, I think, gives you all the tools to be able to continue moving on the path of education. So in other words, I would want you to have an education at the beginning that gives you the tools to continue to educate yourself for the next 50 to 70 to 100 years, because in all likelihood, many of our younger listeners are going to have a lifespan that's going to be significantly longer than yours or mine. So how do you continue to learn through life? And I think you start by getting the right base of education that allows you to continue moving through whatever iterations you pursue. And obviously, I think I might even have seen that in a comment that someone dropped in here, curiosity. But curiosity comes from having enough pieces of a framework to be able to think about problems and ask the right questions. And all of that is, I think, basic education.
You kind of hit on a key point that technology moves quickly and that the requirement to continue to learn. How do you keep up on technology? Are there any specific resources that you use? Could be blogs, podcasts, articles, anything that you would recommend is, hey, this is a great source to go out and stay abreast of what's changing in technology.
So I love reading about this stuff, and I love talking to people, and I go to quite a few conferences and listen, and not legal conferences, but cyber conferences like Cyber Law Con. We did one last year, Cyber War Con that's coming up, Black Hat, DEF CON, and just talk to people. I mean, that's the intelligence officer in me, is talking to people. But you have to just read a huge amount. It's an almost continuous pursuit of knowledge that I have, and I have a lot of different signal groups that are constantly discussing latest developments and the like. There's no substitute for swimming in the flow of knowledge, and I don't think I have. I wouldn't recommend one thing over another, because there's so many good resources for it. And then, particularly with things like the technology tools, you play with them. The first time I saw one of the chat bots in a beta version, I was just amazed. I thought, wow, I'm gonna lose like a week here playing with this. Now I have about 10 of them, I think, that I use regularly, and a lot of it is trying them out, seeing what works better. There's a really good professor at Wharton, Ethan Mollick, who writes very well on the issue of innovation and AI. He wrote a book called Co-Intelligence that I've recommended to a lot of people. He's not an AI guy, he's not a technology person per se, more innovation. And I was just reading an interesting piece he wrote about how do you test, how do you check your AI for what works better. And there are all these tests that academics are running against AI models to see how well they perform. But he suggested, look, you have to do it yourself. You have to figure out which of these fits your style. And he's got some tests, for example, that he does to generate images or ask questions that he uses with all of them at the same time to learn which one works better. That's a little time consuming, but if you think of the time savings and the efficiencies these tools can give you, if you're using them the right way, it's worth the investment. And I think, if there's one thing that I would love to do at this point in my life is just, take a year and go into the wilderness of AI and just try, work on all these different areas to fully understand it, because I do think that this is more than revolutionary for humankind in many ways. And I'm generally optimistic. I'm not worried too much about whether jobs will be lost, because I generally, when I see technology and the history of technology, the more of it we have, the more work we create. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I didn't spend maybe more than 20 minutes reading emails in a day. It would be a nice day today where I could only get away with just 20 minutes of email reading, right? Instead, emails fill up my day. I think the same thing with AI. It's going to create a lot more work and more jobs possibly than it does take away. So,
All right. Are you finding that AI is becoming a more prevalent topic in terms of the law side of what you work with? Are clients or other companies becoming more focused on that?
I think it's the number one topic because here's the reality. The profession of law is been probably the least disrupted of the professions out there. So I think medicine, consulting, accounting, I mean, you name it, they've all already met and had to deal with the impact of technology. Lawyers have mostly been able to just have that innovation at the edges. And part of it is we are a monopoly. Only people who pass the bar can practice law in the United States and the States. So we exclude a lot of non-lawyers from the practice. The model has also worked very well for big law firms. They're scaled, they're very leveraged, with partners like me, and then associates or the younger lawyers and all that. This phenomenon of AI, I think, is going to turn this upside down in many ways, and it challenges the basic idea that you need a human to do the complicated work that a lawyer often does, and I'm not sure that many of my peers fully recognize this. I think many of them think this might be a little bit of a fad. It may help doing some things better, but ultimately they are still going to be better at it. And I was struck when I was reading an article about a couple of professors, I think at MIT, physics professors, who were talking about how they were having very intelligent conversations with a generative AI tool on their theories for new research. And I thought to myself, if people of that caliber, that intelligence at the top of of their profession are finding it productive to discuss such theoretical topics with an AI machine, I mean, that's groundbreaking. And so that's what I try to do. That's what I don't think about problems now the same way. I start with, how would I start this problem discussion with one of my bots to see what they would think? And then I get those ideas. And, obviously it works much better if you already know a lot about what you're doing. If you're starting from nothing, it's not going to be the same effect. But it's critical. And that's why I teach this class at Georgetown, because we were definitely seeing law students coming in with a kind of I'm not sure I should even be doing this. Is it allowed? Is it, and we've really pushed for them to be extremely hands-on. And I was very heartened to hear after the first year that several of my students got offers to go to law firms for that next summer, in part because they knew AI, they had learned a lot about it, and the law firms were interested. Oh, well, you should come because maybe we can learn something from you. So, yeah.
So you've got an army of bots helping you out, but let's say we have some of our listeners that are flesh and blood humans that are wanting to, kind of follow in your footsteps. Do you have any recommendations for specific types of education, credentialing, besides, obviously law, but whether it's a specific degree or certification? Does any of that stuff help anybody going in there, or is it basically, like you said, having that exposure and working knowledge?
Yeah, I think it does. When I first started, I don't think they were that good. And people would say, "Well, you don't have a CISSP," and I said, "No, I have a CIA. So what are you gonna do about it?" Right? No, just kidding. No, I think the two that I would often suggest to start with would be a combination of the CIPP, which is for privacy professionals, and CISSP, CISSP. And I especially like CISSP because of the rounded knowledge of the tech stack that you get, in particular the networking, how the IP layers work and all that, which I think is very important. So if you do both of those, I think you've got a good platform, and then you could go, many other areas. But those two, if you've shown me that you've been able to successfully test out of them, that's a significant opening achievement. At a minimum, it shows that you had the fortitude to go and do the work to get there, which is important.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking up at the clock, and I can't believe we've already actually burned through our half an hour. We may have to have you back on for a part two in the future. This has been an excellent discussion. One last question I'd like to ask all of our guests: if you had the opportunity to go back and redo everything in your career, would you? Is there anything that you would change or do differently?
So I would take two classes in college that I wish now I had taken. One is typing. I think I could save like 5 years of my life if I had learned how to type well at the beginning. And the other one is a good class on acting. I find, especially from the work I did at CIA, but recognizing when people are putting on an act and how to convey something through your body language are two extremely important attributes of my work. I wish I had done a little bit more to understand the professional part of that. So, yeah.
I don't think we've heard either of those answers before, so that's awesome. I appreciate that. Guillermo, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience today. We'd like to go ahead and share your LinkedIn profile with those that are watching in case they'd like to reach out to you for additional questions or seek some mentorship in their career paths as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for those that are watching or listening to the discussion today, I want to thank you as well. Today's discussion will get posted and available via our websites and YouTube channels. The Tortora Brayda Institute and Association of Cyber Forces are committed to reshaping and empowering a diverse collaboration and developing a cyber workforce. And you, the listeners, are the reason why we do what we do. We hope today's conversation has helped you on your cyber development, professional development path. And on behalf of Tortora Brayda and AUSCF, thank you. Thank you again, Guillermo. And we look forward to having you join us at the next Cyber Workforce Series discussion.
Thanks, Nate.